Hello and welcome to the Spandex and Wine podcast. I'm your host, Robin Hackney, and I'm so happy that you're here. This podcast is a place for conversations about balancing a healthy lifestyle and being happy. More specifically, happy hour. Together, we'll explore all things wellness and wine. I hope you learn a little, laugh a lot, and along the way, know you're not alone on this balanced wellness journey. Ready to jump in? Pour something in your glass that makes you happy because it's time for Spandex and Wine. Hello and welcome to the Spandex and Wine podcast. I'm your host, Robin Hackney, and appreciate you taking time to listen to today's episode because it is full of amazing information. I reached out to another name on my dream list for guests and was honored when both Dr. Tanda Cook and Dr. Katie Collier said yes to being on the show. Dr. Cook is a naturopathic doctor, farmer, author, and chef dedicated to all things food farming and helping you. Dr. Collier is also a naturopathic doctor dedicated to putting you on a new path towards health, vibrancy, and living a life of purpose. Together, they are helping thousands feel and live better through their content on Instagram, their Soapbox Docs membership, and one-on-one coaching. This is going to be an episode you will want to listen to multiple times, share with a friend, and take notes. I've listened twice already, and I'll likely listen again because it contains so much insight and the knowledge of two amazing women. Let's get going. Well, hello and welcome to the Spandex and Wine podcast, Dr. Tanda Cook and Dr. Katie Collier. It looks like it's beautiful where you are as well. It's gorgeous here in the Kansas City area. And I just appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here and have this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. I know when we initially spoke, I wanted to talk about the importance of protein, especially as a woman gets to perimenopause and menopause. But I have so many other questions for you too, because Dr. Tanda Cook, I've been following you for quite some time. And now, Katie, because of Tanda, I enjoy all of your content. You guys are helping so many women and bringing to light different issues and some like health hacks that I've been doing too. So I know I started doing dry brushing because of you, and let's see what else, castor oil. So it's so interesting to see all of your posts and information. But let's start with protein.
Awesome. Yeah. So protein for women in particular. So the number one reason why women find us is because they want to lose weight or they have hormonal imbalance. And which actually kind of breaks our heart because weight is a terrible measurement of health. And yet our society puts so much focus on it. And, and then these women have been following these diets and they've been yo-yo dieting and they've lost weight and then they've gained the weight back. And then they're convinced that their metabolism is broken. And then that of course sets their hormones off. And what Katie and I do really is kind of zoom out even further from that. 96.2% of us are metabolically unwell. And most of that is starting in our teenage years. There are studies showing now that from Harvard kids, that they take these Harvard students and study their metabolism and their blood sugar. And the one caveat or the one requirement that these teenagers are being used for is they have to be sedentary. So they're sitting in their dorm rooms and they're studying and then they go to bed and then they eat late and then they wake up and they study and then they may walk to class, but that's kind of their life. And so it sounds sort of like the typical American. And so they're showing that insulin resistance and metabolic issues and blood sugar imbalance and blood sugar dysregulation is starting in our teens, which is wild. So I'm 44 years old. Katie will be 44 next 2 or 3 months from now. 34, sorry. And so knowing that for myself, that has most likely started, 3 decades ago, which is really alarming. And so what does that mean? It means that when we start to have this insidious process of insulin resistance and blood sugar dysregulation, we get fat storage, we get leptin resistance, which is another hormone that our body releases in terms of its response to food. And then we get other hormonal imbalance, we get cortisol dysregulation. I mean, it's just kind of, by the time a woman hits 40, 50, 60, they're kind of a metabolic mess. And this is high blood pressure, this is high cholesterol, this is high triglycerides, this is insomnia, sleep dysregulation. Then they're hitting perimenopause and menopause, which then, of course, estrogen is tanking, progesterone is tanking. I mean, it really becomes a snowball of disaster. And that's when a woman will come to us and say, I'm eating ice cubes and I still can't lose weight. Well, then we look at their fasting insulin and it's in the 20s. And we want to see fasting insulin around 4, which we have never seen. Katie and I are running these labs on all of our patients. And it is an alarming issue. I promise I will get to the protein question. I just wanted to set the stage, like how metabolically unwell we are. And as Westerners and Americans, we've been sort of eating the standard American diet. You know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s with the fat-free craze. And you notice when we removed fat, we all got thinner. And being sarcastic, it's like, no, we got removed fat and most of us gained weight. Why? Because you take fat out of something, what's left is mostly sugar. And so then we're eating, so we're removing the thing in our body that really, fat and protein are one of the 2 things to the main foods that tell our brain that we're satiated and we're full. And so when you remove one of those, it becomes very confusing to those hunger fullness cues. And then we get very dissociated from our hunger fullness cues. So when women come to us in their 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s saying all of the complaints, autoimmune disease and hormonal dysregulation, hypothyroidism, skin issues, hair loss, weight gain, perimenopause, hot flashes, shoulder, joint pain, all of these complaints, and we look at their diet and their diet is irregular. They're eating not on a regular schedule. They are eating, typically they like the food that they're consuming, they have been told that is it sort of enough for them. And, but there's no focus on protein, because what protein does is it will help maintain muscle mass, and muscle is your currency of longevity. And the number one thing associated with longevity is community. I think the number one thing associated with longevity in the body is actually muscle mass and protein consumption, because when you have healthy muscle mass, you will have healthy blood sugar balance. And when you have elevated insulin, it is an underlying trigger for inflammation that will then lead to disease. So if we can get women focusing on a protein forward food plan, then we can start really managing blood sugar and insulin issues. Then we can really start addressing underlying inflammation. Then we can really start addressing the underlying causes of disease. So that's where protein, it's not just about, oh, protein makes me feel full. Oh, protein makes my cravings go away. Oh, protein makes my sleep better. Oh, protein actually is building muscle for me. It's like really sort of zooming all the way back to the root cause of disease, which is chronic inflammation. And how is a protein forward diet going to help that? It's blood sugar balance.
And I think, even just listening to everything that you were saying, you can see how it is a snowball effect. And listening to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, the average woman is probably just sitting here going, oh, I'm doomed. Like, what in the heck am I going to do? So be able to have that guidance from doctors like the 2 of you is amazing. And the fact that you are putting things out there on Instagram for free that are going to help people. I mean, you have your courses and you have your coaching, but just starting there, having a place to start is amazing. And thank you so much for putting the content together that you do.
Yeah, you're welcome. We love it.
I can tell. It shows. You guys are so passionate about everything that you do and you talk about. And I can see you like sometimes getting worked up a little bit about, this. So it's great. I love it when a person is so passionate about everything that they do. So besides protein, I feel like women just accept when they get to a certain age, they're like, yep, I'm just going to have this stomach. Yes, I'm going to just have sleepless nights. And it's so sad. It has to be so sad to you as well that they're just accepting this. So what would be some steps that people could take to maybe start the process of healing themselves?
Well, I think it's also just really important to first acknowledge that women do go through a very significant hormonal change in, perimenopause and then ultimately through menopause, and that it's not something to kind of take lightly. I think it's something that yes, we all go through, and it can be a challenging time of life. I also think it's a really beautiful time of life to take stock of your health. You're entering into a new phase. It is as significant of a change in hormones as puberty was. And our bodies didn't look the same pre and post puberty, right? Our bodies may not look the same pre-perimenopause, pre-menopause, and post-menopause, and that's okay. But the thing is that it shouldn't be as challenging for women as it traditionally is. But that is also because of the state of our bodies when we go through this massive hormonal change. And as we approach perimenopause and menopause, what happens is our body is going through a massive amount of change. So our brain is talking to our ovaries, and our ovaries that's who are making estrogen, that's making progesterone, making testosterone. Like, they have been running the show ever since they came online when you went through puberty. What's happening in the years leading up to menopause is that those ovaries they're approaching retirement, and sometimes they show up in the office and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they get their work done and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they tell people to do their job while they're not going to be there, and sometimes they don't. And so it can be like, I want to normalize the fact that we may feel off in that perimenopause year, and that is really truly by human design. Because our brain is still talking to the ovaries just aren't necessarily doing their job very well. And so from month to month, you may feel a little bit different because your body, the ovaries 1 month may be able to make enough estrogen and progesterone, and they may ovulate, and it may be a very healthy egg, and you feel on top of the world. Then the next month, you might not actually ovulate, or if you do ovulate, it might not be the best egg quality. So you're not producing as much progesterone. So you feel different than you did the month before. So there's over like 300 different symptoms that can come with perimenopause and menopause that are unfortunately kind of by design. That being said, it shouldn't be debilitating to your life. You shouldn't be getting hot flashes every hour, not sleeping, feeling absolutely terrible in your body, having all this excess weight that you just can't touch. But it is when we're not in balance. What happens when the ovaries exit stage left in menopause is that we need to then create some level of these sex hormones, albeit at a much smaller level than we are during our kind of menstruating reproductive years. But we still need estrogen, we still need testosterone, we still need progesterone. They have other jobs that they do in the body. Like, estrogen is very cardioprotective. It's for our bone health, for our brain health. Like, we need estrogen, we need progesterone, and we need testosterone. So who's making that when the ovaries go offline? It comes from two places. One place is our adrenal glands, which are two little glands that sit on top of the kidneys that are primarily responsible for our stress response, blood sugar balancing, and electrolyte balancing. And they make sex hormones when we need them. What happens is that a lot of women have been living very, very stressed out lives, and they enter into this time of life and the ovaries exit stage left, and then the adrenals have to make sex hormones. And unfortunately, the adrenal glands are like, I actually need to prioritize the stress and the blood sugar problem. We don't really need that estrogen. Yes, you might feel better if you had some, but it's just not a priority for me. I've got too big of a job over here. I don't have any time to do it. That's essentially what the adrenal glands say. Mm-hmm. So then we feel like absolute crap, because the second best place that we can make those sex hormones are our adrenal glands, and they're not doing a very good job of it. So the second place that women can make estrogen in particular is fat cells. And so what if that fat that you are accumulating through perimenopause and menopause is actually protective to you in some cases, right? It's actually not your body betraying you. It's actually your body creating an alternative to estrogen. Now, we don't want your body to lean on fat cells for that estrogen production. We want your adrenal glands to be able to do that. But in order for that to happen, we have to talk about blood sugar. We have to talk about insulin resistance, like Tanda just said, to set that stage so that and we have to talk about stress. I mean, it is an epidemic. We are so stressed out. We are so burnt out. We do not take care of ourselves very well. We spend a lot of that nurturing energy outward and not a lot inward. And we can get away with that in our 30s and 40s, but by the time we get to, late 40s, 50s and beyond, it starts to catch up to us, and our body starts to give us that message in the form of how difficult menopause can be for us. So when we address those things and allow our body to do what it naturally does, is allow those adrenal glands to turn on and make those sex hormones for us, we actually then see it is willing to let go of some of that stubborn fat, because we don't need to lean on the fat to make the estrogen for us. The other thing to consider, and why protein is so important, like Tanda said, particularly at this time of life, is that when estrogen tanks, like it does in menopause, and it naturally does that, that's by design, we become more insulin resistant. And so our blood sugar and our ability to handle our blood sugar diminishes, which is often what we see is like, we're already coming in the gate with issues with insulin and insulin resistance and blood sugar balancing. And then our adrenal glands can't take over. And then also, because we've lost that estrogen, we're already more insulin resistant. So it's like, we see how we come into perimenopause and how we come into menopause is a huge indicator with how well we will feel through that. So it truly is, I think, as challenging as it can be for people. And I do want to acknowledge that it can be a very, very painful transition for some women. It actually, if we use it as the information that it is to take stock of our life and take stock of our health, we can actually go into, the next decades of life feeling much better, feeling much healthier, living longer, being more capable, being able to be in our body in a way that we just hadn't before. So if we can use it as a barometer, if you will, for health, I think that, it's just kind of reframing that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then my next question, two questions. So how do we keep our adrenals healthy? And two, I hear a lot of women just going straight to hormone replacement therapy. And I haven't done that just because, I've read about the side effects and things like that. I want to do things as naturally as I possibly can. Is there a place for that? Or would you completely steer someone away from it?
We would need 4 days to go over what keeps the adrenals healthy. But, in terms of time's sake, the number one treatment for the adrenals is routine. So the adrenals they're developing primarily between the ages of 0 and 2. And if you think about what you're doing between the ages of 0 and 2, it's you are born and then you latch onto your mom's breast and then you poop and then you sleep and then you wake up and cry and then you latch onto your mom's breast and then you sleep and then you poop and then you cry and then you play, and you know what I mean? It's like you are in this rhythmic routine with following circadian rhythms, your mom's rhythms. And so the number one treatment for them is routine, which is free, which is actually pretty cool. It's just that people are really bad at doing that. I don't know if you use that word, but they really are. And what that means is going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. It means eating at regular intervals. It means moving your body every day. It means getting sunshine on your face. It means grounding to the earth. It means creating this routine that because the adrenals, because they are our survival gland, they don't want to know. They don't want to be guessing when we're going to eat next. They don't want to be guessing if we're going to sleep tonight. They don't want to be guessing if our blood sugar is going to be balanced, or they have to send a message to the liver to make glucose, which is called gluconeogenesis. Like, they don't want to be guessing at how you're going to be running your day, because otherwise they have to step in and help you survive. And so the more you can help them by keeping a routine around those things, sleep, movement, and food. Hydration is a good one too, because they are connected deep to the kidneys. So that, and they love earth, like grounding exercises, which is walking barefoot in the earth, playing in a garden, getting those earthing mats. Those are very, very important for adrenal health. In terms of supplements, if you cut an adrenal in half, then there's the cortex, which is the outside, and the medulla, it was on the inside. And there's vitamin B is in boy, and vitamin C is in cat, are the two primary vitamins, like the B complex, are the two primary vitamins that are concentrated in the medulla. So in the adrenal glands, so making sure that 99% of our patients are on some sort of vitamin C and or some sort of vitamin B complex. And getting a methylated version is probably the best bet, just to make sure that you are actually using those B vitamins for nervous system health. Outside of that, do you have any other, it's like eating whole foods, keeping your blood sugar balanced. A lot of these things are kind of free, right? And I would say primary is keeping a routine. We cannot emphasize enough the importance of sleep. That is the master dial of health. I made that up. It's not like a stat or anything. I just think personally, like if women in particular can get their sleep dialed like 7 to 9 hours in total darkness, in a cool room, ideally the more hours before midnight, the better. And then waking up and getting sunshine on their face for melatonin and cortisol regulation, that is a wicked cool way to balance your blood sugar, and to just feel better in your body. Because during sleep is when you detox, repair, restore, regenerate, and heal.
I love it. I love it. And that's just so interesting about routine. I mean, I didn't even think about that, doing the exact same thing. I mean, I've heard going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. I've heard that, but that's fascinating and it makes total sense. So to the person that just can't sleep, like I have so many women that come to my class and they're like, oh my gosh, I slept 2 hours last night, or I woke up this many times. And I feel so bad for them because I know that sleep is so important to me. I would rather have a hangover than a bad night's sleep. So it's really, really important to me to get my sleep. But if someone can't sleep, if they can't get to sleep, or if they wake up in the middle of the night, what pieces of advice would you have for them?
Well, it really is about figuring out why they can't sleep. There's a million reasons why we can't sleep. It could be blood sugar because it's, tanking in the middle of the night, which is then waking you up. It can be hormone imbalance. It can be anxiety and racing mind. And, it's just like there's a lot of reasons why people don't get high quality sleep. I mean, I think at the very minimum is just being conscious of what we call sleep hygiene. So making sure that you do try to go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time in the morning, getting that morning sunlight for as quickly as you can. But when you wake up, getting sun on your eyes, because the first thing that you should be thinking about when you wake up in the morning is about getting sun so that you can sleep the following night. That's going to help regulate melatonin, which is our primary sleep hormone. So cortisol, which is also our stress hormone, one of its other very important jobs is helping us regulate our sleep-wake cycle. So that circadian rhythm. Cortisol should be naturally highest in the morning. That's what helps us wake up in the morning. It helps us to feel alert. It helps us to, kind of get started with our day, to get that momentum and that inertia after we've been sleeping. And melatonin and cortisol really do this dance. So in the morning, cortisol should be highest. And when light comes up, when the sun comes on, then melatonin drops. Then as we approach closer to sundown and nighttime and, getting ready for bed, melatonin comes out because it's triggered by light. So when it's dark, melatonin comes to play and cortisol should be at its lowest. Then melatonin does its whole thing throughout the night. And then we just keep playing that again and again. So when we are exposed to light and we can burn off that melatonin first thing in the morning, and we can help to stimulate that cortisol awakening response. What happens is it helps that routine. So when then we go to bed at night, melatonin knows where it is in the cycle. When we mess with melatonin and cortisol through light, which is also why light is really important to think about our light exposure come evening time and nighttime, is because it can artificially suppress melatonin, because melatonin, again, our primal system would have been designed for not artificial light. Long before electricity, we've been following the sun to let us know where we are in the day. When the sun goes down, melatonin gets that signal that it's time for sleep, and it will start to secrete. When we use our phones, or we're in front of a screen, or we're watching television, or we have a lot of artificial light in our homes, even just the ambient lighting that we, when we have lights on, that will suppress. Now, the lighting in our house will have a less effect on melatonin, but it still will have an effect. The screens, the blue light on our screens are one of the worst culprits, because the blue light mimics sunlight. So that blue light actually is telling our eyes and telling our body that it's daytime when it's actually nighttime. So if we're having a lot of screen exposure in the hours leading up to bed, we like to tell people a minimum of 2 hours before bed, no screens. I know that can be challenging for people, but at very, very minimum, 30 minutes before you go to bed, no screen exposure. And if you do have to be on your screens using those blue light blocking glasses, or they have the orange glasses, I'm sure people have seen those online, to help block the blue light exposure to our brain. So sleeping in a cold, dark room, our brain has to actually cool by 3 degrees to enter into sleep, which is pretty significant. If you've ever had a fever of, 101, 102, that's a significant change in body temperature that we typically regulate very tightly. But the brain actually does have to cool by about 3 degrees for us to enter into sleep. So helping that out and sleeping in a cool room with complete darkness, again, not to not disrupt that melatonin. What else? Sleeping and waking at the same time. It's like if we get those dialed in and you're still really struggling to sleep, which we also see in our practice, then that's cause for a deeper investigation of what's really going on. But I would say at the very minimum is make sure that you've got all that dialed to see whether it is just, kind of a sleep melatonin issue or whether there is something kind of more going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I've heard also that if you take melatonin, then your body then doesn't produce it the way that it should. Is that correct?
That's actually false. It's one of the rare hormones that have that negative feedback loop. So we can take melatonin and it won't disrupt our own production of it. We don't make as much melatonin as most people will take in a supplement. I also think it's really important. That one in particular, getting a high quality supplement from a professional brand makes a very big difference. I've had a lot of people who have said that, they pick up a bottle of melatonin at CVS and it doesn't do anything, or it just makes them feel weird. That typically tells me that there's a lot of filler in that, and there probably isn't high quality or even as much melatonin because there's not a lot of regulation around supplements. So making sure that you're getting from a high quality brand that does that third party testing. I've seen that one in particular to be a really big deal. So you can take it. I mean, I typically recommend like between 1 and 3 milligrams to start to see how you feel. The worst side effect that you would get from melatonin, it's actually a really powerful antioxidant as well, but would be very strange dreams, like just like very vivid dreams. Or if you actually wake up in the morning and you kind of feel that like groggy hangover from melatonin, that might just be an indicator that you took a little too much, and just dial it back by 1 milligram or 0.5 milligram.
Yeah, and the other thing that we don't do is do it long term because it doesn't decrease the production, it decreases the receptors on our cells. So that's probably what you're thinking of. But yeah, and again, it's like if we can use it as a tool to get a woman to fall asleep or a kid temporarily, yes. And if it works, then we know it's a melatonin issue. And that's
that makes sense.
Then we highly encourage getting that morning sunlight and creating more of that sleep regulation. Again, it's like we rarely want to rely on an outside thing to solve an inside problem, right? So it's like our bodies are perfectly designed to heal. And, if you rely on a melatonin supplement and you have for the rest, for a decade and it works, well, we know you have a melatonin cortisol dysregulation. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. And I know that you two also stress, going back to what you said about having lean muscle mass, the importance of strength training. And 100% I'm with you there. What would you say is like the minimum that someone should be strength training?
Yeah, I think 3 times a week is the minimum. Yeah. Strength training is just one of the most important, because of that connection to muscle and longevity. It is one of the most imperative things, particularly as women, because we are becoming more insulin resistant when we go through perimenopause and menopause. And because we lose that protective effect of estrogen, we become very susceptible. So it's 98% of women, if you make it to 80 or longer, you will have osteoporosis or osteopenia. So that means that we're actually breaking down our bone. And estrogen is very protective to that, and strength training is very protective to that. So one of the best things that you can do to maintain your bone density is to do resistance training and to lift weights. You're also going to be protecting your muscles, so you're going to be having that kind of like higher metabolic. It's going to be helping you to balance that blood sugar. It's going to help balance your hormones. I think it is the most critical, most important way to move our body, particularly as women and particularly as we age. And people just don't really think about when we lose muscle, we lose ability to move around. And one of the largest killers are falls as we get older. And so They're entirely preventable if we just maintain our muscle mass and we keep our body physically strong. And so I think it's just, as we think about transitioning through perimenopause and menopause and into those next decades of our life, it can be a really beautiful time to redirect and to start to acquire these habits that are going to help protect our body over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time, but I do have a couple more questions. One of them being cholesterol. I had a discussion with my chiropractor once about cholesterol and why it was lowered from 300 to 200, as far as, with big pharma and all of that. So I'm curious. I just heard one of my clients say the other day that she's in the upper hundreds and they wanted to put her on a statin. What would you say is an okay, and I know it depends on the individual, so just be very broad here with cholesterol, because I know cholesterol has gotten a bad rep. We have to have it. It's a good thing in our bodies. So speak to cholesterol if you don't mind.
Cholesterol is one of those things that I get on a soapbox and I get pretty heated about because first of all, statins were never studied in women. They were studied in men. And statins have, I'm not going to go off on statins, but there's a lot of reasons not to use that drug. And other reasons to address why is the cholesterol high. Cholesterol is protective. And, and just getting your total cholesterol, LDL and HDL and triglycerides and saying you're good to go is a huge disservice to patients, because cholesterol is not all equal. If you think about LDL, HDL, and then there's, very low density, very, very low density. So if we imagine cholesterol as all these different size balls, so there's like beach ball size cholesterol, that's the HDL, that's like the big fluffy stuff. And then there's golf ball size cholesterol, there's tennis ball size cholesterol, there's softball size cholesterol, and they're all floating around your blood. They all have different jobs and they all do different things. And then there's something called ApoB, which is essentially a blood test that you can get that is a collection of all of the quote unquote bad guys. There is no such thing as good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. And if a doctor is telling you that, go find a new doctor. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash on that, but it's true. It means that that doctor is not up to date on actually how to read cholesterol and what it's actually doing in the body. So the ApoB is a way more accurate a predictor of cardiovascular disease than just total cholesterol. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot. So the ApoB is collecting all of the more inflammatory balls, if you will, of cholesterol and getting a read on that. And the question again is why? And so when the body is triggered, there's an inflammatory response. Cholesterol, I view as spackle for the body. So it'll go sort of patch that hole. And then HDL, which is been quoted good cholesterol, will then come in after that spackle is done and kind of play cleanup duty. So it takes like the H back out and it cleans up that repair scene and goes back to the liver. And so when there's a lot of spackle, which means there's a lot of damage in the blood and not a lot of the HDL, which is the cleanup crew, then you're put on a statin because you have too much quote unquote bad cholesterol. Well, Katie and I are like, well, why is there so much damage? Why is there so much inflammation in the body such that the body thinks that it has to go repair a whole bunch of stuff and not have enough protective called HDL in the body? And meanwhile, ApoB, which is a collection of all the really damaging inflammatory cholesterol, is really high. I mean, we want to see your ApoB like below 60, ideally, below 40, really, which studies are showing. And most of our patients are running up into the 130s, 140s in their ApoB. And so it's not just looking at cholesterol is not the entire picture. You also have to be looking at insulin resistance. Look at the fasting insulin, look at uric acid, look at total triglycerides, look at CRP, which is C-reactive protein, look at homocysteine, all of these inflammatory markers. So the fact that some woman comes in and is like, oh, a doc wants to put me on cholesterol because my LDL was 145. I just think that's a shame because it's not the whole picture. And usually postmenopausal and even perimenopausal women's bodies, because they're changing, will have all this quote unquote sudden elevation in blood pressure and cholesterol, and then immediately put on drugs. Well, are they being asked about their hormones? What the heck is going on with estrogen? What's going on with testosterone? Anyway, it's so complex. And this is just a 3-minute rant on cholesterol. It's like, this could be a 4-day course on how the body works, protects itself. It's like the body's not making a mistake. So then the question is why? And, and then just to throw a drug at it makes me want to tear my hair out. And I don't want to tear my hair out about all pharmaceutical drugs. The statins are one of them. I just think they're not used properly. And again, they were never studied in women. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
No, the question is, the answer is really like, it's not the whole picture. Go, get Dr. Mark Hyman. Do you follow him? Yeah. He has, it's called Functional Med or some Function Health, I think. Function Health. He has a blood panel that you can order yourself, and it will give you a huge range of results, all the way from your metabolic health, your sex hormones, your thyroid, your nutritional health. And it's like $400 or $500. That is worth it. So if I would take a deeper dive, if you're being told as a woman that your cholesterol is high, I would take a deeper dive and go to a functional medicine doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I'll have to put his information then in the show notes as well. All right. So my last question, this is not going to be a popular one with my listeners, given this is spandex and wine, but I need to ask because I know your body doesn't metabolize alcohol like it does other macronutrients. So that's the importance of moderation. Can you speak to what happens to alcohol in your body and why it is so important to take it in moderation?
There are increasing, and wine is super fun and tastes delicious. And I have to say there's bad news because the more studies I am reading, podcasts I'm listening to, we both follow Peter Attia. Do you follow him?
I don't. I'll check it out.
So Peter Attia, and I'll email these to you. So it's like Peter, Mark, Hyman, Huberman, the Huberman podcast. All of these guys who love wine and tequila are saying that there really are no benefits to alcohol, that it, especially in postmenopausal women, in terms of the blood sugar dysregulation, the stress on the liver, the stress on sleep. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, I was listening to a podcast the other day, I can't remember who it was, and she was saying, she's perimenopausal right now, and she was the host and she's a doctor. And she was like, I love wine and I know it messes with my sleep. So she's like, I just know that when I have a glass of wine or two, that I'm choosing a bad night's sleep. And she's like, I'm just conscious about that. Mm-hmm. So it is all in moderation. So if you're hanging out with your girlfriends and you're having a really good time and you want to have, a margarita or a glass of wine or two, know that it will most likely mess with your sleep wake cycle and most likely blood sugar and hormones and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then there's other things to do, like castor oil packs, things to support the liver, a protein forward, breakfast the next day to support blood sugar. So there's some other ways, sort of some hacks that you can counterbalance some of the problems that alcohol can trigger.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Good. I wish we could had more time and we could talk about all the health hacks and things that you put out there because it's all amazing. So how can people find you and what types of courses and things do you guys have going on right now?
So the best way to reach out to us is via Instagram. So mine is at Dr. Katie Collier and Tanda's is at Dr. Tanda Cook. Also, I think you can reach us on Tanda's website, drtandacook.com. We've got a couple of fun things going on. We have our weekly membership. It's called the Soapbox Docs, where we literally do this. We get on our soapbox and we talk about all things health. So that's super fun. That's every Wednesday. We go live. We have a really cool group of women who are just, kind of up to wanting to learn more about their body and about their health and get to the bottom of what's actually going on. And so we talk about hormones. We talk about cardiovascular health. We talk about mental, emotional stuff. Like we really kind of run the gamut. So that's every Wednesday at noon, and then they are noon Central or noon Eastern. And they are recorded so people can watch them at their leisure. So we do have the Soapbox Docs, which is super fun. And then we also do one-on-one client coaching as well. So if you're, wanting to run some labs and get more guidance on really how to treat your body individually, we've got a couple of really amazing physicians and coaches on our team that can help you do that.
Well, very cool. I love what you guys are about. I love the messages, like I said, the content that you share. So thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and for being here.
No, you're so welcome. We're honored.
topics.
Wow, I told you it was going to be a great episode. I was taking notes for takeaways, actually like 3 pages of them. And if I share all of them, it'll take another 15 minutes. How fascinating was it to hear them say that 92.6% of us are metabolically unwell and that it started in our teens? I love that they promote a protein-forward diet and say that muscle mass is the key to longevity. So get your strength training in, ladies. And when Dr. Collier mentioned we should view menopause as an exciting change, that was a bit of a stretch for me personally, given the current state that I'm in, but I'll do my best to change my mindset. But when she said that there were over 300 different symptoms that come with perimenopause and menopause, that did make me feel a little bit better. I feel lucky to have not near that many. Oh, and then the talk about the adrenal glands. Wow. I mean, it's just so cool and fascinating. Did you hear Dr. Cook mention the importance of routine? Again, fascinating, and something that I've been working on actually, both my morning ritual and my evening ritual. Go back and listen again, because I guarantee you missed something like I did the first time. All of your girlfriends need to hear this episode. So if you do not know how to share, please let me know and I will send you instructions. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to follow Spandex and Wine so you don't miss an episode. To do this, just go to the podcast and click subscribe or follow wherever you are listening. Look for the plus sign or follow button. This is one of the best things that you can do for the podcast. If you'd also be willing to give a 5-star review, that would be amazing and much appreciated. Lastly, please share an episode with a friend or 5 to keep the love going, and join the Spandex and Wine community in our private Facebook group by searching Spandex and Wine. Feel free to reach out to me at any time by emailing info@spandexandwine.com or text me at 913-392-2877. I appreciate you. Thank you.